So real quick before this gets started,
This conference will now be recorded.
brothers, welcome to another web episode of Getting Ready to Facilitate at Balfour Leadership Training Workshop. I am Corey Rigler, and joining me today is Jim Holcomb, and we're going to be doing a quick presentation on the Preparation for Brotherhood curriculum. This video is essentially intended for a facilitator or an alumnus who wants to know a little bit more about preparation for brotherhood, but it was really designed with the mindset of if you're not on the Queastor faculty, if say you're in any of the other teams, you still are going to have a chapter team. And we would imagine that preparation for brotherhood and the pledge program and initiation would take up part of that chapter time and part of that discussion. So we want to make sure that you're as knowledgeable as you can be about the program, that you have responses to some of the common questions or concerns about P4B, and ultimately that you yourself become an advocate for it. Jim, did I leave anything out?
No, man, I think you're nailing it.
Sweet. Okay. So let's get this started right out of the way. Jim, I heard that Preparation for Brotherhood was an online only pledge program. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that's a common misperception, and one that I think we've been fighting since day one. Back when the P4B program, P4B being Preparation for Brotherhood, was an 8-week program. We strive to have 10 hours a week dedicated to pledge education. Of that 10 hours a week times 8 weeks, 80 hours, it was less than 6 hours online. Now that P4B has been condensed and streamlined into 5 weeks, 50 hours of pledge education, it is less than 4 hours. So, that myth is false. And I would say, well, if human beings are what are we, 70% water? No one walks around calling us a glass of water. I think at less than 4 hours of online education of 50, there's no way that you can call this an online pledge education program.
Well, I suppose that's a good answer if you're not good at math, So,
well, and let me throw this in too, man. And I think one of the there's some great benefits to the online stuff, right? And I know your Sigma Chi experience has been shaped by some of the mentors and great SIGs you've met. Mine intimately shaped by meeting Doug Carlson as an undergrad, and I know like not everybody has that opportunity. Well, with the online portion of the program, man, we're able to bring Doug Carlson, for example, Dick Hester, Grand Historian Mike Cadena, and the Grand Consul into your pledge education program. Now, left to their own devices and without the magic of the interwebs and webinars, they're never going to hear from these guys. And so these guys, man, get a opportunity right out of the gate to hear what the Grand Historian says and knows about the founding of Sigma Chi. And I think, man, how can you be against that? I, as a young undergrad Queastor, or any of our undergrad Queastors out there, despite their best efforts, aren't going to hold a glass of water to the knowledge Mike Cadena brings to his knowledge of the founding of Sigma Chi.
Yeah, I think when this first concept kind of first got rolled out, I think the way some of the rumors that I was hearing was that there's no role for the Queastor anymore. He's just going to hit play. And essentially these guys just have to sit down and shut up and watch this video. Instead, it's all supplemental stuff. And, currently I'm the Grand Praetor. And when I get a chance to talk to, almost all the brothers now in my chapters have gone through P4B, but even some of the older guys who haven't, consistently they say, I wish I had, because that's really cool stuff in there, So. So good. I'm glad we addressed that. The other thing is, I've actually seen this on Facebook a few times, but I heard Sigma Chi doesn't even have a pledge program anymore.
Well, if Sigma Chi doesn't have a pledge program, we've got a couple problems. One, my wife is going to want to know where I've been when I've said I've been going to these P4B planning meetings for the last 5 years, right? So, and there's a couple of very generous alumni who are going to want to know where their money went as they've endowed this program. Obviously, man, I don't know what to do with crazy talk other than to present facts and say, listen, man, the Norman Shield is still there. There's still weekly pledge meetings. There's still experiential exercises. What we've done is taken a lot of the best practices practices and the most beloved aspects of pledge education and put it into this preparation for brotherhood program. So, yeah, man, no, it's as good as it ever was. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. It's better than it ever was. It's a far better program than I had when I was an undergraduate. It's a far better program than I put on when I was a Magister. And I think it is a far more comprehensive program than most of our undergraduates have ever experienced, for pledge education.
Yeah, I agree. And on this next slide, if you're watching, or if you're not watching, if you're just listening to it, what we actually have here is an actual timeline of P4B. And most people don't realize how far back P4B went. But it's interesting. I was on Magister faculty for a long time. I was actually on the original Preparation for Brotherhood committee way back in 2002 that was chaired by Jack Widener, and Hester was on there, and Sam Simino, and a few other people. But we started with this basic premise that, clearly you're an athlete. When I look at you, I just that raw athleticism jumps out at me.
Oh,
but
obviously, as well
but
as
for
my
those
animal
who,
magnetism. Yeah.
but for those who follow any kind of sports, the analogy that we used way back in 2002 was in your average chapter, it's football season. Pledges come in, they're given helmets, they're given pads, cleats, they're taught how to tackle, they're taught how to run routes, they're taught how to block, how to throw a spiral, catch a spiral, maybe maybe how to kick a field goal without having a helmet with only one bar across it. And then it's initiation, and now it's basketball season. And now these guys have no clue what to do on the basketball court because all they've been taught is football. And so there were so many pledges out there who truly were not. The goal was not to turn them into good brothers. The goal was to turn them into great pledges.
Right.
So that was the premise that we started with way back in 2002. And one of the things that we did way back when was, we actually kind of started compiling chapters best practices, and the intent was we were actually going to go to a standardized pledge program way back in 2002 and say, like, hey, week one, you have 10 potential best practices to choose from. Week two, here's another completely different 10. It never got off, but one of the things that we did do, we were able to rewrite the Norman Shield, and for the first time, we very much called out hazing has no part whatsoever in the pledge program. The other thing that we really called out, we don't care if you consider yourself a great pledge. The quality of your brotherhood will not be dictated by how flawlessly you can recite the Jordan Standard. And unfortunately, that it almost kind of got tucked away and started incubating until about 2009, when the executive committee for Sigma Chi then said, let's dust this off and look at it. And now here what we have is, for people who can't or who are already following on the screen, I think what this slide does not show, though, is how much the landscape has changed even since 2002, right? You can do a Google search, you can type in fraternity, and the first 3 pages, if you Google fraternity or even Sigma Chi, are usually very, very negative news stories. So that was not the landscape in 2002. And furthermore, now we've got a situation where entire college campuses like Florida State, Texas, rather than just deal with an individual chapter, they're just shutting down the complete Greek system. So it has changed dramatically. And with those major changes, now here we have, in 2014, the Jordan Initiative, right?
Right. Right. And so that's really, kind of where, my involvement comes in with pledge education. And at that time, Mike Greenberg becomes a grand consul, says, hey, I got a couple ideas of things, I might be interested in having you do. I said, sure, whatever you need. I serve at the pleasure of the grand consul. And he says, how about we take a stab at eradicating hazing? And I'm like, let's do that. Nothing else sounded more important to me. Nothing is more passionate for me than that, right? So our approach was, initially we were going to build a curriculum and sort of a triage out in the field where we saw chapters having trouble with that, right? And so about the first 6-7 months, we spent our time developing that curriculum and did so. And we had a group of facilitators all trained up. We did a couple pilot tests, and that was great. And then in early, I laughed just at the absurdity of this next part, man. In January of 2015, what I like to call Hurricane Greenberg struck ground, and he calls into our meeting or comes into our meeting and says, "Hey, man, I want to do a standardized pledge education program. I want it to be awesome. I want it to be very Hollywood and fantastic, and I want to pilot it at workshop this August." And that really sort of
I mean, what did you do with all your free time after that was done?
right. So I mean, we worked on that for like 2 weeks, and then like, I guess it's time to make T-shirts. So yeah, dude. I mean, that was nuts. And so we did our first briefing to the executive committee in March, and sort of gave them the 8 weeks of the 8-week overview of what that looked like. And I'll give you a little behind the scenes because someday somebody's going to want to know how the hell this thing came to be. When we kept coming to pledgeship and creating a process to go by, and I'll say this: we went out and got feedback, man. You couldn't shut us up. We wanted to talk to everybody, and I know sometimes P4B gets a errant bad rap for, they don't listen to anybody. No, quite the opposite. We listened to a lot of people and made a lot of changes. Sometimes people's ideas are just stupid, and so we don't listen to those. But I will say that in the beginning, man, the thing we consistently heard was how important the Model I Week was to people and how impactful that was, and how much that mattered in the development of these guys as Sigma Chi's. And so the question obviously became, well, if I Week is so important, what the hell are we doing with the other 20 weeks of pledgeship, that they had at the time? 16 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever the program was. Like, what the hell are we doing? And so how could we then replicate the Model I Week from back in the day into this program? And so, we then went to surgically extracting the Model I Week and the concepts of that and some of the activities from that, and putting and making that the foundation for P4B. So, there's really no secret sauce, man. Like, that's why it works. It's because a lot of great work was done on the Model I Week before.
Well, I want to go back and cover that, because one of the criticisms that I've heard of P4B is that, you just mentioned it, is that it's just too bad that nobody's able to give feedback on this. You guys kind of created this in a bubble. And for those listening who don't understand my greatness and everything, I was intimately involved with the creation of Horizons and was on the oversight board that created the program. And I was also with Cornerstone, which doesn't exist anymore, but some of that is its thumbprint or its fingerprint has been felt in other programs. I was on the Journey committee, kind of rolling out some of these Journey modules, and and many other things. But there has never been a program that has actually gotten more feedback than P4B. And
None.
And I have to say, honestly, though, it's not that we didn't want feedback on those other programs, but with P4B, the technology was there. You could do instant survey monkeys or Zoomerangs, and there was instantaneous feedback. And the fact that, P4B actually did over 40, pilot programs at 40 different chapters. We learned about what worked, what didn't work. And if it didn't work, guess what? It was changed. So, I feel that much of the criticism about P4B is completely unfair. I wish that, there was ways that we could be a little bit more aggressive with, okay, here are the misperceptions. Here's the truth, right?
Right.
But I guess that's what the point of this video is, right? So,
right, yeah, part of it, man. And let me just throw in there, like, man, I get it. People are passionate about their pledge experience, right? And the way I explain it anytime I talk to undergrads is it goes like this: like, hey, you love Sigma Chi. I get it. I don't even have to talk to you. I don't even need to take a survey. You're going to say you love Sigma Chi. I get it. You believe that you love Sigma Chi because of the way you were brought into Sigma Chi through your pledge program. And you see a lot of heads nod, and I said, right. So it would stand to reason. I mean, and fully logical that, man, you want your program replicated, for the next guy so that they love Sigma Chi the same way you do. And, lots of heads nod, like, and I get it, dude. And I said, well, here's the problem. Like, we have to assume that I love Sigma Chi too. And, and neither you nor I came into the Sigma Chi the same way. So it stands to reason then that we can get people to love Sigma Chi in different ways, and those ways are equally valid, right? Now, my concern is that those ways aren't often equally value centered. And my pledge program, your pledge program, was not Sigma Chi value centered, not value centered at all. And I love Sigma Chi because I was able to see beyond that nonsense, man. So, like, I get it, and I'm not even angry. Like when people want that, that they're upset that it's not theirs. Like I totally get that, and I understand it.
I love that response, and one of the reasons I love that though is because well, for a few things. One is in my undergraduate chapter. I know this was not everyone's experience, but there was a fair amount of hazing, as it came to I Week. Not pledge program, but definitely in I Week. And then so I was hazed, and then when it actually came time for me to help take other classes through, I was a hazer. I mean, I'm very, I feel very ashamed at at taking something that should have been so pure and so important for these guys and just turning into just garbage for these guys. But on one hand, I mean, I hear these guys say, like, well, you're taking away all our best traditions, which is okay. I get it, but I look at my pledge class, for example, and we all went through the exact same program. And why is it that 20 years later, I mean, hell, even 5 years later, where were they? Like they all disappeared. I mean, nobody comes back for homecoming. Nobody donates money to the chapter. Nobody's done anything with the international fraternity. So, I don't think that it was the pledge program or the I Week shenanigans that went on. I think it was rather the individual. Or maybe there were some really great SIGs, potential SIGs, who basically went through a process like what I did and was like, I thought this was something different than what it was supposed to be, and never mind, I'll just go devote my talents and time and resources and future success to another organization. Which
I can give you 20 names of guys like that from my chapter.
Yeah. Now, the other thing though about that I think needs to be addressed is those guys who will be in the chapter discussion groups who will say, I don't know why we have to do P4B because my chapter didn't haze. I mean, and it's a softball. I'm going to let you answer it, but I know how I answer it. But let's hear the Jim Holcomb take on that one.
Yeah, well, I say, when you say, my chapter doesn't haze, I would argue that your review of the chapter is, probably 4 semesters long. And you and I have been at this game for a long time, and I can go back to my time on headquarters staff in the mid-90s, and pull reports that I wrote back then about how awful your chapter was, for starters. So, hey man, if it's not you today, it was likely you yesterday, and if it wasn't you yesterday, it's probably going to be you tomorrow. And the other side though is, we're all preparing to see the same ritual. And so to some degrees, it would stand to reason that, man, it would make sense that we all have the same process going into that, so that, we put the right emphasis on the right things, so that, hey, when you see these things or you hear X, that it matters and it resonates in your heart, and then becomes exemplified in your life. So, and just because you weren't hazing, doesn't mean that, your pledge program was awesome. Again, I go back to, no matter how awesome your pledge program was, unless you had the grand historian coming into your pledge meeting every week, I think we can do it better, and I think P4B does it better.
I absolutely could not agree more. And I think, in addition to everything else that you said, when we look at alumni participation, it's what, 2%?
Yep.
So if what these chapters are doing is so great, where is everybody?
Right.
Why are you and I both on 20 different committees? Like we should be fighting people off. Instead, it feels like we're taking, our unfair share, if you will. But
right.
again, this is for the listener or viewer of this video, but that I was surprised that I had so many brothers tell me that. They almost felt like they were being penalized, and I really had to stop and say the lens with which you're viewing P4B needs to be
Mm,
changed. This is not a
mhm,
penalty. This will make
mm-mm,
your chapter better. And in
yeah.
fact, I know, and I know we'll get to it in later on in the presentation, but the feedback from these pilot chapters said, man, our
Mhm,
big brother program is better and more robust than it's
mhm,
ever been. The
mhm,
quality of the guys being initiated is better than it's ever been. Their activity and participation levels is better than it's ever been. And it was all attributed to P4B. So, when I talk with my chapters, one of the things that we kind of talk about is, hey, what are the biggest threats to P4B and or your overall success in the chapter? And number one is actually alumni.
mhm. Yep.
Where I think too often I think some of these guys are kind of coming back, and I think they're romanticizing, their own experiences, and and what a shame, to do that, So,
Yeah.
because guess what, my experience in initiation not that great,
No,
So
no, just awful.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
uh, yeah. Yeah. Hey, let me, while we're talking about, P4B and its impact, and at the end of this timeline here, right? So we see that we test piloted over 40 chapters. Um, Last year, Sid McKay went live to all 240 plus undergraduate chapters. Well, this last year, and normally I don't get caught up in awards, and uh, they're fine if they matter, but like I'm really proud of the fact, the two things about P4B that I want to brag about, the people who've been involved. First is that AFA, it's the Association of Greek Advisors conference. For the last couple of years, by here tell from Executive Director Mike Church and Jim Cogdell, who've been down there, they put on a presentation about P4B, and the thing is packed. The thing is packed every year. Uh, and people have a lot of questions and they applaud P4B. And I tell you what, man, like we give out resources like, we're giving out air. It's just free and anybody who wants it. And somebody came up and asked, like, don't you guys want to protect this? I mean, this could be a competitive advantage for you. And we said, hey, man, all boats can float. All boats rise in a high tide, man. So we want to give this out. Like we are better when Beta is better. We are better when SAE is better. We are better when Pike is better. You know, and part of our calling is to be leaders among others, right? And so I'm really proud of that, and that came sort of full circle this last spring when we were notified by the NIC that P4B was awarded what's called the Laurel Wreath Award, and that's for outstanding leadership programming to undergraduates. And that's all fine and well, but man, the thing that really touched my heart and should be impressed upon anybody interested in understanding the impact of P4B is that two of our letters of recommendation came from outside the organization, and one was from the Greek advisor at the University of Alabama. And if you don't know, the University of Alabama has one of the largest Greek systems in the nation, and it kind of runs the school, and so that's a lot of whack when the Greek advisor for that entire program says, hey, man, Sigma Chi was a broken chapter at our school. They implemented P4B. I've seen the difference. I believe in the power of this program. And the other letter of recommendation came from Beta Theta Pi, those ritual stealing mofos from 1855. Uh, wrote a letter of recommendation, man, and talked about, not only how great they thought the program was, but how impressed they were with how generous we were with our time and resources in helping them, get on the ball and get up to speed in their efforts to revamp their pledge education process. So, if guys can't see how great this is, man, let me tell you, other people do.
Well, one thing that we also didn't talk about, the changing landscape, and I think this is hugely important, is how many of our Greek cousins are insanely jealous
Mm-hmm.
of this program, right? When we
Mm-hmm.
take a look at the three biggest fraternities, right? We've got Sigma Chi, we've got SAE and SIGEP.
Mm-hmm.
What
Yep.
SAE and
Yep.
SIGEP don't have pledge programs, right? Within so many hours, their guys are just initiated. So I think the fact that whenever someone's like, oh, I heard some guy doesn't have a pledge program. No, that's not true. Actually, we have gone above and beyond to ensure that, that the pledge program remains a vitally important part of Sigma Chi, right? So,
Agreed. Yeah.
yeah, so it's, I know I said this last year at BLTW, but, if you're going to be a relevant part of BLTW, you need to be an outspoken proponent and supporter of P4B, because not having it for this fraternity is really not an option. And I absolutely believe that. So,
Yeah, it shouldn't be. Yeah.
but, so I think what we've done so far is we've really kind of delved into like, okay, what's the background? What's the need for it? And I think that that's maybe been one part of the message, maybe that the average person doesn't know. So now that we've given that landscape and the history of it, now let's just sail through the curriculum. And actually, this is the exciting part about it, right? So
Yeah.
it used to be an 8-week pledge program, and now it can't be any longer than 5 weeks. Let's go through it. I mean, let's make sure everyone listening to this call fully understands kind of how awesome this thing is and all the
Yeah.
components of it.
Thanks, man. Yeah. So, like you said, we have a 5-week pledge education program that begins with a commencement week and concludes with what we call a ritual bridge, and that's the sort of the warm up act for the initiation. And you'll see at the top, each week has a theme. Beginning with course 1, so courage, wisdom, and integrity, high ambition, self-control, courtesy, and fidelity. Those who paid for the upgraded version of this webcast will realize that those are indeed the 7 virtues of Sigma Chi. And so we highlight a virtual week. We talk about that founder more in depth that week. And we really kind of drill down into some personal application for your life, right? So each week has a pre-session, and that's where the online portion comes in. And I say, hey, this isn't really structured that differently than any college class. So there's online learning, there's reading of the Norman Shield, and that all takes place before you come to your, wait for it, pledge meeting, where you meet with your Magister, and your Magister sort of gives the expanded content version, man, of sort of the more salient lessons from that week. And then there's a experiential exercise each week, and one of the first questions, with the undergraduates is, I'm concerned about things being left. I said, you pick, what's your favorite experiential exercise? And 100 out of 100 times, it's man in the glass. I'm like, dude, it's there. Man in the glass isn't going anywhere. We should just put it in the ritual because everyone loves it so much. You should marry it. So we have, then we go into the experiential exercises every week, and then we follow that, man, with the post-session activity. And so in the post-session activity, we have guys meeting with their big brothers. We have the connections where they're getting out and they're meeting with other members of the organization. There's journaling that happens there. I'm having a hard time reading the fine print at the bottom. But again, then there's more prep, more reading from the Norman Shield, and then we roll into course 2 for the following week, right? And so it's all kind of continuous. There is a weekly exam, that happens at the end of each P4B module, and yeah, sorry about that. I just saw the screen change. And then so the weeks repeat, and it keeps happening there. Now you'll see in the group sessions, man, and again, this is where the Magister really shines, and the assistant Magisters, and for that matter, anybody that they want to extend that command and control to, anybody that they want to empower to be part of this, can come in and teach. Maybe you got a guy who's super geeked up about the founders and the founding, or knows a lot about Constantine. This is their chance to come in and share that information, with these guys. Again, being sensitive to the amount of time that we try to keep this to every week. So then we repeat that process every week. And then we come to the ritual bridge, which begins on Wednesday and concludes on Friday night, prior to their beginning the ceremonies of initiation late on Friday. And so in the ritual bridge, we have a couple interesting activities. A new one is called Connecting the Pieces, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. And that's the only activity on Wednesday. Sort of is a wrap up to their P4B experience and sort of an introduction to the remainder of the week and what they're going to see in the ritual. On Thursday, there's a 7 candles exercise, literary exercises in their final candle pass, and that's when the Magister gives his final hurrah speech. On Friday, they've got the dinner where they share their letter to the chapter about the things they plan to do, maybe the things they've learned, and then we roll right into the ceremonies of initiation. I know I'm forgetting something in all of this.
Well, so let's talk about what is not there, because I know this is a change from the eight week program, and that is the inclusion of chapters local events.
Oh, right. So in the beginning with the pilot and in the last couple of years, we've had a process whereby chapters can petition to have a their local events included. Now, there were some parameters to that, like, hey, whatever you're suggesting has to be able to be included or replicated at every chapter, across North America. And we get some interesting suggestions. Oftentimes, what we got was just a modification of an existing experiential exercise, and it didn't necessarily enhance it. It was more like, hey, well, we do it here, and this is the way we like it. Well, there's what you like there. The guys in another chapter or another part of the North America aren't going to dig. And then, man, it was pretty apparent that there were some abuses, of that latitude and that policy. And one in particular, where a chapter lobbied to have a spaghetti dinner after the pinning night, and they ended up serving alcohol, and the pasta sauce was anything but pasta sauce, and the whole idea was for these guys to throw up, and the alcohol was champagne, and so I know there was a membership review, and I can't remember if they lost their charter or not, but so I think. If anybody wonders, hey, why can't we do this anymore? You can thank that chapter among the several others who did similar things. And again, with a 5-week program, man, if everybody going to the nearby founder's grave is important, then hey, go do it in week 6. There's nothing stopping you from going on Founders Day every year and visiting the founder's grave or whatever is near and close to you. But in order to stay within the 5-week time frame, man, and to replicate a consistent and good pledge education program, we got to keep it tight with the curriculum. So.
Yeah, I feel so strongly about that. In addition to the hazing in my undergraduate chapter, there were some really, really cool traditions they did, including what we had this thing called dedications, and that was if anytime you did something good for the chapter house, you had to memorize it, and that was great. And at some point you're like, man, if this is so important to us, if this is such a great important part of our legacy and our identity, why do we only bring it out during this 1 week? I mean, like, why don't we live that a little bit more? Why don't we ask guys to know it all the time? And so I think it's forcing a lot of people to look at things differently. Rather, is it the tradition that's important, or is creating great brothers?
Right.
Is that really the outcome that we should be striving for?
Right. And your example is something we ran up against a lot when we talked about implied silence. And I think we both know, and everybody who's listening, if they're honest, realizes that implied silence is really mandatory silence. And so, anytime you get that feedback, like, hey, where's that? We did that in my pledgeship, and that was really important to me. I said it was life-changing, really changed my life. And it's okay. Well, if it was so important and changed your life, when was the last time you did it? Pledgeship. Right. So things in my life, like reading and, investing in my friends and going to church and spending time in solitude, if those things are important to me, and they are, I do those things a lot.
Yeah.
To constantly better myself. And so, and there is time for that. There's time for guided silence during the journaling stuff. So what it's not is a confiscation of guys' phones. It's not a sit in a room and be quiet and just read this, because that's not real. That's not preparing you to be a Sigma Chi. It's preparing you to be an obedient pledge, and ultimately is worthless.
Or go to the library.
Yeah, right.
I do implied silence every time I go, man. I don't know what the issue is.
Yeah. Right.
Good. Well, I think that this is just I mean, it's jam packed. I I don't really remember that much about my pledge program, but I seem to remember being a little bit bored. So I think this is good. And the other thing is too, I have guys asking like, "Okay, is it like after 5 weeks? That's when we initiate." No, no, this is 4 weeks plus change, right? No longer than 5 weeks. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
We all did that.
So, ideally, the pledge meeting is going to start on a Tuesday. Or pledge meeting will be on a Tuesday night. They end on Tuesday night. The ritual bridge begins on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So this is a fun, busy, exciting slide. Why don't you tell me about this?
It's the Sigma Chi wheel.
And wait a minute. Um, I hope nobody viewing this is colorblind. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to understand what's going on here.
Take your dogs away from the computer screen. This is only going to confuse their untutored dog minds.
Oh man, sorry. I was on a plane yesterday and I was actually watching Little Miss Sunshine. Do you remember that movie?
Oh
This,
yeah,
this kid
love
like
it,
gets
dude.
accepted to the Air Force Academy. He's like, yeah. They're
Oh
like, all
yeah.
right,
Oh,
and he's like, read this number. What do you mean? What are
heartbreaking,
you talking about? Just no.
heartbreaking,
Oh,
heartbreaking.
poor bastard.
Hey, spoiler alert for anybody who missed all of 2003's movies. Riggs just ruined one of the great scenes from The Sunshine.
Oh,
And also, she comes out to a stripper song at the end. So,
right. Uh,
oh, yeah, Steve Carell in that movie. Who knew? I love him. Yeah.
yeah.
So this Sigma Chi pinwheel of death is what this is the graphic that we use for our connecting the pieces um, exercise, and this is kind of new in P4B this year. And the idea is to demonstrate and use a graphic to demonstrate like how this is all connected and how what you're doing now and how what we're teaching you now is connected back to the founders. If you're familiar with Simon Sinek's start with why, you always start in the middle, right? And so why are we here? We're here because of our founders. Those founders lived according to a certain set of principles, and we ascribe a virtue to each of them. And you see that in the second layer with those 7 virtues. That next ring are the manifestation of those, and that is a life, in pursuit of friendship, justice, and learning, the great purpose of Sigma Chi. And that darker blue ring outside of that is all the things that came as a result of that commitment of their value-centered lives, right? So the Jordan Standard, the selection of Constantine, Ritual Bridge, and philanthropy, the Sigma Chi history, all the stuff grows out of their, the original 7's commitment to these ideals, in this purposeful life. Then you see the yellow circle outside of that, man, and that's kind of where we are. And so if you look around that yellow circle, those are all the things we do in P4B. And that yellow circle, for lack of a better term, is P4B and contains within it all the things inside of that circle to that point, right? And so that's where, in that yellow circle, that's where we go back and we drill down and we teach everybody about our founders, about the values, about our 3 great aims, about our history. And we do that using all those tools in that golden circle. Sigma Chi U, group sessions, candle pass, Big Brother, literary exercise, etc. And then outside of that is what comes next, for the initiate, and that's ritual for life. That's the learning continuum.
I love this entire concept because,
cool.
Yeah, right. One of the things that you and I've talked about separately is, right, the definition of initiation is what? To begin. And yet, how many guys after initiation, they would go through the circle, for the, that little thing we do at the end, and they would say, "Oh, thank God that's over."
Right.
Know, and all the enthusiasm was so short-lived. But I also think that we were basically saying, to the initiated brothers, once you get through that, you're done. We've got nothing else to teach you. And so the fact that we are completely changing that paradigm, that no, this is truly the start. Now we're going to really kind of dive in depth into the ritual. We're going to show you how it's applicable. We're going to turn you into a successful, effective person, a successful, effective leader, a better husband, father, son, partner, whatever. So I love this. And for those who have been involved with Sigma Chi for a long time, this is what we've been operating by anyway. We're just kind of putting pen to paper and letting the formula be available to everyone else.
Yeah, just kind of codifying it, man, and it really is at the heart of who we are as an organization. And I would be remiss if I didn't, um, share Doug Carlson's one of our last conversations. We talked about this, and I said, "Hey, man, I'm getting ready to go to workshop. Um, it's going to be your first workshop, my first workshop without you, and probably the first one you've missed in quite a while. What can I share with the undergrads?" And he says, "Remind them that our quest inspires us to a greater role in life. That Sigma Chi is about being on an upward path. It's not about maintaining." And what I love about that that connecting the pieces graphic, man, is that it shows that after initiation there is more. And it says ritual for life. And while that's the name of our program, man, that should also be, your philosophy for this organization. That it's ritual for my life. It's ritual for the rest of my life. So, yeah, I'm really glad that works.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Okay, moving on.
Yeah. So again, what we've done is not rocket surgery, man. And we have several successful programs in Sigma Chi, and Horizons being among those. And we had some folks in our creative team that worked on Horizons. Has certainly been an integral part of Horizons. And so we said, "Hey, man, why does Horizons work?" Well, hey, because they attack each part of the brain, man. We all learn in different ways, and the brain works in a certain has a certain process to it. So let's replicate that in P4B, and so that's what we've done. And we've done that using the following programs on the next slide.
Ooh, look at
Yeah.
that.
So we use this blended instructional approach, right? So under self-instruction, we've got reading the Norman Shield. Whoop, all your slides are jumping way ahead.
Oh,
there you go. Got to go back there. Might have been on a timer. One more back, if you don't mind. Thanks, Patty. So when you think about each of these parts of the P4B, they are uniquely different in their own way, and not only what they seek to accomplish, but how the user interact with those. So there's self-instruction, right? You have your Sigma Chi, you have your reading of the Norman Shield. Then you come together for a group discussion. Then you have an experiential exercise, and for those kinesthetic learners that learn by doing, I mean, that's a pretty powerful tool, and one of the reasons that Man in the Glass resonates with everybody so much is, you do Man in the Glass. You don't just, you don't really do the Norman Shield. You read the Norman Shield, but you do Man in the Glass. You do initiation. And that's, why those things tend to be more impactful. There's peer coaching, not only with your big brothers, but with your Magister and other members of the chapter. There's application portions of that. And then there's journaling, that quiet reflective time to dwell on all this. Hit that next slide. And we try to do this, man. We do this in 4 distinct ways. So we've got a pre-session that we talked about, the group session, the experiential activity, and then post-session. And I've sort of talked you through the loop that reoccurs every week. And as you see here, it's broken down that, man, it really shouldn't take more than 8 to 10 hours a week for guys to engage in that. So, yeah.
So the question I have is, now you're in charge of the Magister division, and what are the Magisters effectively being taught how to teach and how to facilitate? Because way back when I was a Magister facilitator, there was no time given towards that. Instead, it was like, we know you guys haze. Let's basically help you guys to create a different pledge program. But now that that's been done for them, how much time is being devoted to Magisters kind of being the master of this craft, if you will?
Right. So let's see, carry the 2, 0 time. No, I'm just kidding. We've got, and it's a pretty tight schedule, man. So we were able to eke out about an hour and a half for facilitation in the Friday night dinner. So we're bringing the pro consuls over because our committee is also rolling out the Ritual for Life program this year. And man, it doesn't matter how great of a program we build, but if we don't enable the guys to facilitate this well, it's going to fall flat. And I equate it to, hey, I can give you a Ferrari, but if you can't drive a stick, you're not getting out of the driveway. And when we were doing the pilots, I visited a chapter near my home, and I attended all their pledge meetings. And man, it was abundantly clear that not only did the McGeester prepared very little for this, but in his preparation, he never once considered, what some of the questions might be for somebody who's new to the organization. Like why would the founders care about that, or why would the founders act that way, or there was never any next level thinking, and I thought, man, what a missed opportunity for that. And so yeah, we're really spending as much time as we can. Well, and honestly, we don't have a lot of time, so we're making time to address that over one of the dinner sessions.
Well, it's the reality is, I mean, being a McGeester is a lot of work, but I think the other great thing about this model is it involves everybody, right? It really
Yeah,
does, and
for sure.
and I think that the other thing too, if these guys are going to BLTW, guess what? BLTW is not the one-stop shop for everything they need to learn. It's it's a very important part in their development as leaders and officers, but that they still, for them to excel at their craft, they've got to do stuff on their own before, they've got to do stuff afterwards, they've got follow up with their McGeester facilitator, they've got follow up with their chapter facilitator. So I mean, this is a work in progress, and I think it's really important to set that expectation for these guys.
I agree, man. I struggle at times when I talk to these guys, and the highlight, the hardest part for them, or what they envisioned was the hardest part, was getting elected to the job, and for many of them that was the most exciting part. And I'm like, dude, you've got so much more work ahead of you.
Right,
Uh,
right.
like holy crap, dude. Getting elected McGeester might be the easiest job, because knowing what I know about this program, who would want to do it? What 20-year-old guy would say, yeah, sign me up for what seems to be an insane amount of work? So if it's done right, the reason you would sign up, and this is where choosing the right guy becomes so important, is the payoff could be immeasurable, and it could change the direction and the dynamic of your chapter for decades to come.
Yeah, yeah. So you've already mentioned some of the big wins with P4B. We talked about some of the feedback and stuff, but let's actually dive into the feedback, because again, I think the average facilitator, if if they're sitting there in these chapter meetings and a facilitator says like, oh, well, okay, like, if they're getting asked these questions, I want these facilitators to have these statistics in their back pocket that they can say, listen, we know P4B works. How do we know? We've done nothing but survey after survey after survey. We know this works,
Yeah. So, and again, this is coming out of the pilot, and so there's one number, the 78% agreeing that that the e-learning on Sigma Caillou helped and was effective, and that's a low number at 78%, but that was Sigma Caillou version 1.0, and it was a little glitchy, and there were some problems, and quite honestly, a lot of those complaints come from user error as well. But no here nor there. That being said, we've made significant changes to the online learning portion, and what used to be like a 14-15 minute Sigma Caillou module, there's now one there's not one that's longer than 8 minutes. So I think that will help bump that number up. But when you go back and you think of hey, everybody gets a big brother and everybody loves big brothers, but there was never really anything to do with the big brother. The big brother was supposed to be your advocate, and if at least in my chapter, if they're trying to kick you out, your big brother tries to save you with the chapter, which my big brother had to do several times. But now, man, with the Big Brother program, we have things that they're actually deliverables every week. And so we saw that 91% of their guys met with their big brothers each week. One of the pushbacks we got early on was we did big brothers right out of the gate, man. Week one, and they're like, well, why? We need time to get to know these guys, and what I keep coming back to, and now with a 5-week program, it's even more important, is nothing in P4B is about you, the initiated member. None of it is about you, the alumnus. It's all about the pledge, right? And it's about his experience and about his onboarding into this great organization that we love, right? So if that's the case, why would I wait 3 weeks? In an 8-week program, that's almost halfway through. In a 5-week program, it's over halfway through. Why would I wait that far into a program to give you somebody who can be a surrogate leader, guide, friend, and counselor?
Mm.
You know, I don't think there's any good answer. And then 81% agreed that the experiential activities enhance their learning, which that's a pretty good number. And then we see the Sigma Chi stuff, and we've made improvements on that. So all those, man, I think those are wins. And it's 100% better than the numbers from before because nobody tracked how effective their pledge education was before. So,
Um,
um,
I don't know if
go
you
ahead.
heard a glitch. It sounded like your Optimus Prime just there. I'm not sure if that's going to show up on the
Oh,
recording or not. It was cool.
oh,
The
I would love to sound like Optimus Prime.
oh man, I mean, yeah, it was God, what's that? Not techno, dubstep. Oh man, you just put on a dubstep show. So right in the middle. I know that there's so many different success stories. I know that there
Yeah.
are, you know, I mean, there's schools all across the nation. Like where, say for example, Sigma Chi is the only fraternity that's allowed to have a pledge program,
Mhm.
or everybody's kind of doing their own thing. But the Sigma Chi is, because of P4B, has almost been made an exception. I make
Mhm.
sure in my province that all my Greek life advisors and VP of Student Affairs know about P4B. But I think this example of Cal State Northridge it's one of my favorite stories to share. Maybe you can give us just a little bit of background on it.
Yeah, yeah, you
Share with
bet.
everyone.
So, yeah, back in 2014, another fraternity on campus decided that they were going to take their pledges out, have them do I believe it's a prolonged hike in the forest out there, and one of the pledges ended up dying. The university said, "Hey, that's it for pledge education. Everybody's going to have a 15-day program, and it's going to come from the president's office." Um, Fortunately for us, Hurricane Greenberg was able to touch down in CSU Northridge and meet with the president of the university. And Sigma Chi was the only organization that got an exemption to the pledge education program, and that was conditional on their doing P4B. Now, as a sub story here that you're not seeing on the screen, you would think that, hey, the young guys at CSU Northridge would be grateful that they had a pledge program, unlike anybody else. Uh, that was not the case, at least for their McGeester. I can't speak for the entire chapter, but the McGeester felt free to wear us out about how horrible P4B was. I said, well, you're welcome to do the 15-day program that the university is offering, but I'm not sure that your chapter is going to dig that. So, um, so as a result, the university overwhelmingly approves and allows the chapter to use P4B, stating, "quote There is worth in values-based learning, and this then 8-week program is the best of values, history, and blended learning offered to all Greeks right now." Um, and again, that's a culture, man, that had a death, and where pledge education was dead on arrival with a DNR, stapled to its chest. Um, and these guys looked at it, and again, I can imagine they're looking at it with a charitable eye, but they look at it, man, and as educators, as leaders, they see all the things that they want to see in a pledge program in P4B. So I think that's some pretty high praise. Riggs, are you there? Maybe I lost him.
Oh, sorry,
That's
I've got a pug named Chicken. He's a total asshole. He was going off, and man, I had the most eloquent, most beautiful
sure.
monologue just now. I hope I can remember it. But what I was going to say is that it's too bad that so many people view P4B as being punitive. It's really not designed to be,
Right.
right? That having been said, there's a reason we can't have nice things. I mean, like the reality is that as much as this was proactive, there is a reactive component as well. You know,
Yeah,
I,
sure.
I, but the thing is, yes, so that's great that this chapter at wherever, State University didn't haze. Well, guess what? When somebody else within Sigma Chi does haze, it results in death or injury or, otherwise conduct, unbecoming of our values, then yeah, it's up to the entire organization, and
Um,
unfortunately, there's many parts of our ritual that speak to just that phenomenon. You're not just representing yourself, you're representing all of Sigma Chi.
mhm.
So, my message to many undergrads and chapters is like, I'm sorry that it falls on you and that's your perception. you have to suck it up because somewhere else down the road is another chapter messed up. In many ways, we're paying for their sins. It just so happens that this program, in addition to being reactive, is exactly what our fraternity needed because it is going to create better brothers. It's actually going to take away the onus from being a great pledge to let's actually get you ready for this lifelong commitment. We're more in touch now with our values. They're a better and more prominent part of our pledging program than they've ever been. That way, these guys know what they're getting themselves into. Furthermore, I would like to see with this shortened pledge program that chapters, instead of shirking on their recruitment responsibilities, are now saying, like, they stop saying, hey, we'll pledge anybody and we'll use we'll use pledgeship as a way to weed them out. No, I want you guys to actually have a true 365-day recruitment. So I think this is such a phenomenal program. I love absolutely everything about it, and you can tell I'm a believer in it. I truly
Yeah.
am, and I hope the other people listening to this, have been converted as well.
Yeah. Thanks, man. No, and I feel the same way. This really is a win, and hopefully it's an asset for that silent majority, man, that wants to do the right thing, but keeps butting up against the knuckleheads that think you got to earn Sigma Chi, or hazing's the only way we're going to get these guys to love Sigma Chi, et cetera, et cetera. This is a powerful tool, I think, for that group. And it's a proven powerful tool. And the only thing that the other side has proven time and again is we're good at making good pledges who disappear immediately after initiation. So this last slide, man, we titled it, it's going to take a chapter. And this P4B program, man, it really does require a big lift by everybody involved. It's a short lift, man. It's only 5 weeks now. Even at 8 weeks, it's considerably less than the chapter, or the semester I had to manage, or any, length of time beyond the 8 weeks at that time, but now 5 weeks. And so, man, the McGeester really has to be on his game, but he's got help too, right? So he's got chapter officers doing other things and being an assist for him. He's got big brothers, man, actually engaged in the education, and they have assignments with their little brothers, their pledges. The chapter advisor, man, we put a lot of effort into making sure from day one that guys are educated on this. And there's always, there's headquarters staff and the Grand Praetor and other volunteers as well that are standing by and absolutely ready to assist these guys do the right thing.
So this is one of the questions for those is what's the way currently for just alums or facilitators to actually check out this P4B content themselves?
That's a great question. I would say that the best thing is, anybody at the undergraduate chapter, last semester's McGeester has the P4B manual. I know one of the things we're working on now across Team Balfour is we do a great job of preparing our fall leaders for the mantle of leadership. We do nothing to do that for the spring guys. So I know that we are working on putting together webinars for the guys who take over in spring, right? So that they can get some semblance of the education that the fall guys got at workshop. So I would say make contact with the local chapter. There are only X number of licenses at this point, so unfortunately we can't really show or we can't give a license to everybody to view the online content. But again, this is where I say, hey man, if you're really interested, I'd love for you to connect with an undergraduate chapter. I would encourage any undergraduate chapter to have like a P4B preview night for any alums who want to come, and the McGeester can run through the entire P4B, or that might, that's 3+ hours. He may not want to do that, but he can certainly show them what an online module looks like, to allay any of their fears and concerns. But the couple guys that I've been able to share this with, man, have all said the same thing, and that's, damn, I wish I had this when I was a pledge.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and they all enjoy it now, for sure.
I could not agree more. I'm trying to think, is there anything that we haven't covered or anybody we haven't insulted throughout this program?
Man.
I mean, we haven't said anything about Twyble yet, or Magar or Bobby.
Right. But I love them, and I think they could all beat me up, so I don't want to say anything. that'll get back to them. I mean, if I could vocalize one concern about Bobby, and I know you have the same problem too, is man, that guy wears us out with the phone calls. I mean,
I had to up my plan. I mean,
I had to get a second phone because he used all the minutes on one phone, and so I have to text him
oh man, it's hard having a friend who just calls you all the time. You're like, dude, I
all
I got
the
a job and a
time.
family, man. I'm like, what? What's
So
what does this guy
he's
do?
so
Does this guy
he's
even have
so
a
needy.
job?
He's so needy.
Oh man. Well, hey, Brother Holcomb, thank you so much for this time. I hope that we covered everything that you want to know, and hopefully a lot of the shit you didn't want to know but found out anyway about P4B. Because again, we don't need you to just be a part of the conversation. We need you to advocate for it. We need you to be in support of it, and most
Yeah,
importantly, we need you to get across the message that listen, Sigma Chi will really live or die by the P4B program.
yeah.
So
Hey, and I'll add this, man. If anybody listening to this, wants to know more about P4B, and they want a direct line to me or some of the other P4B apostles, just talk the program on the Facebook page. We'll be in touch. We'll get there.
Right. Oh, I wasn't sure where you're going with that, but I'm so glad it took the direction that it did. So,
Uh, Full disclosure though, and I know back in the early days, man, I mean, we were on there. I can remember being in Bali for work, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I can't sleep, and I'm just on the Facebook page just getting after it, dude, and try and honestly, on the public dialogue side, not much happens, but I would always, man, I would personally reach out to every single guy who had a concern. I'd personal message them on Facebook and say, hey man, you've got me. You've got one of the guys that helped design this thing. What are your questions? What are your concerns? And they all come back to the things we talked about today. So, I feel really comfortable that if you've got guys in your chapter, if you've got alumni in your chapter, send them this link, man, and pass along my information. I'm happy to talk to anybody who's sincerely interested in learning about this program and why we're doing it. And I'll give you frank talk and straight answers and no nonsense. So that my shameless plug for how awesome we are at communicating the vision.
I love it. Yeah. For anybody who says that, again, that, P4B is not nimble, they're not looking for feedback, they're not looking for input. Yeah. Yeah. I haven't seen it. So,
Yeah.
okay. Hey, brother, thank you so much. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Hope you learned a lot. Hope you can use it. Hope you can someday make your own video so that we don't have to anymore.
Peace out, Girl Scouts. Later, brother.